Hey there, this is Emily and Bernie from Third Place Works, where we help co-working professionals with tailored cohorts and one-on-one consulting. Our proven frameworks can help you get focused, stay accountable, and see real results. Want to learn more? Check out the show notes for all the details on how to join us and take your co-working business to the next level.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. I said that way too fast, didn't I? Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Co-working Values Podcast. In our studio today is Chris Marr is back in the seat. Chris, for the people that don't know who you are, what do you do and what are you known for?
Hey, it's good to be back, Bernie. Yep, my name's Chris Marr. I'm based in Scotland, in Dundee. I'm known as the Authoritative Coach, and I'm really known for working with people to help them overcome their people-pleasing behaviors and habits and how that shows up in their client work, their client relationships, and their client communication.
So obviously, I'm asking for a friend here about people pleasing, but as
Of
we,
course.
eh, in the little chats we have in the Community Builder cohort and at the London Co-working Assembly events and just, around that people pleasing thing is huge.
Mm.
And c- it just popped into my mind here. How come that's become like a really big thing? Is it because I just hang on every word you say, or is it that people pleasing seems to be out in the public consciousness more than ever?
Yeah, I think it's becoming more popular and people are using it a lot more. I think people are more familiar with what it is and how it shows up and what it actually looks like. But when I started using it more in my messaging, I didn't really see anybody else using it. And then as time's going on, I'm starting to see more and more people using it in their messaging. So yeah, I think it is becoming a much more known and sort of well used, well understood phrase. I don't know
So
why, but I believe it's becoming more popular.
it's Mel Robbins. It's you and Mel
Right.
Robbins. That's what they've done here.
Right.
So
Yeah.
so as you're listening, folks, there's two paths this is going to go down. There's I know a lot of you own co-working spaces and run little co-working spaces, and there's that kind of member community manager relationship going on there. And then I know a lot of you do something else and run a co-working space. So I know there's people who are writers and graphic designers and architects, and you all accidentally opened a co-working space on the side. So you have this like client relationship going on, and then there's this member relationship going on, and then there's a lot of this stuff here today will be useful for all those freelancers and creators and coaches and consultants that are hanging around your co-working space, because I know personally, because I've always worked as an independent economic agent or freelancer as you like, and one of the things I just think I never stop learning about is the boundaries. And when you work for yourself, whether you're running a building or whether you're freelancer or sole trader, whatever you want to call yourself, it's very blurry, that line between when does work start and stop and how far do I go for the client. Um, how do you set those boundaries, or how do you recommend people set those boundaries, Chris, at the beginning, just to sort of anchor our conversation?
Yeah, I think another way to look at boundaries is just based on your experience as a professional, is how do you set the relationship with the client? How do you set the work? How do you set everything, the conditions essentially for success? So when I think about boundaries, I think about what needs to be true for our work to be successful together, right? And so it's the relationship, it's the expectations, it's the how we're going to work together, it's the when you should contact me, when you shouldn't, what you should expect from me, and what I'm expecting from you. All of those things are what people would typically categorize as boundaries. But when you start looking, because I don't know that boundaries is the right word that we want to use. When you start thinking about it as the conditions for success, it actually becomes less about boundaries and more about what's needed for us to be successful together. And it has a sort of more, it has a better value proposition with it, if that makes sense, Bernie. Like
It does. Love it.
you're sort of saying to the client, you're not saying to the client, this is what I need to protect about me and my work, and you're saying actually this is what we needs to be true for us to do our best work together. And I think the client can get their head around that and they can actually lean into it as opposed to it being a sort of personal thing for the coach or the consultant.
So something just popped in my head. I'm going to stop saying that actually. So, um, with I love the way you phrased that. I'd forgotten about that bit. And there's that scope creep thing because when there's I know so, and I've been this person too. I know so many people who are community managers, and while it's more professionalized nowadays, the community manager in a co-working space, as I'm saying, there's so many faces of flowing through my head here of they're the person that manages, guides the community, is what I'd like to say, in the same way as you challenge
Right.
the word boundaries. They guide the community and make all the connections and everything. And then they, sort the dishwasher out. They have to fix the leaky window, and the person that owns the co-working space, or the company that owns a co-working space, accidentally puts more and more stuff on this person. And
Mm,
there's a phenomenon, is that the right word? Like, which is community manager burnout. And
mm.
you end up trying to do everything because you are unable to say, well, you don't know how not to allow scope creep to happen, because a lot of people are younger and they don't know that term yet.
Right. Yeah, so we're talking about two things, but let's just try and wrap them up. So the just so we've got it clear, as a professional, and if you've got any experience at all, like I mean, some people might listen to this and thinking, "Well, I'm really just getting started." But what you want to do here is you want to think, you always want to be many steps ahead of the people you're working with, right? And so you're thinking, what could go wrong 2 or 3 months down the road here? Once we've done this part, what's next, and how does that set us up? And you're always thinking, it's just you're thinking upstream essentially, right? Your role is to make sure that the relationship and the work is set up for success. In order to do that, you're learning from mistakes you've made in the past, that led to less than ideal results or success, whatever you want to, however you determine that. And you're getting ahead of it, right? You're always ahead. We call that the Vanguard Principle, right? That you get ahead of problems before they become problems. You're preventing predictable problems. This is the whole this is like such a big part of being a client facing professional, is that it's your job to do that. You can't expect your client to do that because they're not the expert in the seat, right? They're asking you to work with them to get the result. And so it's our job to say, well, in order to get that result, we'll need to do these things. And this is what, that might be different than what you're used to with the last person you worked with or your experience, but this is how it works when you work with me. These are the expectations. This is what it looks like. And that's the time. So let me just, go into scope creep slightly. Because if you know that, generally speaking, scope creep takes place in the work that you like, there's a good chance that somebody else is, they're going to add something to your plate that's outside the scope of your work or the project. If you know that's going to happen, then the best time to deal with that is at the beginning. And you can say something like, look, typically what happens is we get into the work and then something's going to come up and it's going to feel urgent. Our job is to determine whether it's really important or something that can be deferred or delegated to somebody else, or it's something that we actually need to deal with. And there's two ways we'll do that. We'll either wrap it into the project that we've got just now, and we'll take something off the project, or we'll charge for it, or we'll treat it as a separate project and we'll charge for it separately. Okay. So in other words, what you're doing is you're saying this is how it works. When something new comes onto our plate, we have to make a decision about is it absolutely urgent and important right now? Can it wait? Or do we want to take something out and add this in? Or do we want to run this in parallel as a separate project? So in other words, again, if you say yes to something that you know is going to sacrifice the results that you're going to get for the work that you're doing just now, which might mean you're going to be overworked, you're going to be stretched thin, you're going to drop the ball, you might miss deadlines, you are protecting the success of the work that you're doing right now. And if you say yes to everything, then that can lead to failure later. And so you're not saying no and you're not pushing back on the thing just to be contentious or difficult, right? The stakes are so high around your work and the success that you want to get for your clients that you can't say yes because it has and could have a detrimental effect on the work in the short and in the long term.
Is as you're talking there, I was thinking about that distinction of order taker versus expertise. Like right at the beginning there,
Sure.
you said, I'm the one with the expertise. And there's some people I work with and they appreciate my expertise. And there's other people that, even though I've attempted to spell out what you've just said there, are like, oh, can you just do this for us? Oh, and I saw, Bernie, that you're doing this with us, but I saw you making burritos on Instagram. Can you do that? And it's like, that's not what I do. Like I'm here to do this bit. And it took me, I just know I've done it, and I just know lots of freelancers that sit in co-working spaces who pander to their clients with the best intentions because they're not equipped to have those difficult conversations. How do you can you spell out how to nip that one in the bud early on?
Well, when a client comes to me with something new, I want them to verify to me and help me feel confident that it's absolutely the right thing to do right now. So like clients have loads of ideas. They get pulled from pillar to post and distracted by different tactics. They see one of their competitors doing something and they come to you and they're like, oh, we need to do this and we need to do it now. And my job is to say, do we really need to do it now? Is this actually really the most important thing that we need to be doing right now? And so my job as as an expert partner is to make sure that we're doing the right things in the right order. And the part of that is about getting the client to essentially prove to you and verify with you that it is the right thing. And so my default is to never say immediately yes to anything. My immediate response is, tell me more. Why do you think that's so important? Where did this come from? How did you make that decision? Like really get the detail of it to prove to me that it's actually something that we should be paying attention to. Especially true if it takes us off the path that we happen to be on right now. So when you're doing your work with your clients, you've probably got a set of priorities that you've already discussed that you felt were the most important things to be working on, right? And so actually what you're doing is you're kind of saving your client from themselves, because in the past, the reason they never got to where they wanted to be and the reason they've hired you in the first place, generally speaking, is because they can't do this stuff well. They need someone like you to stop them from getting in their own way, right? So I deal with it in that sort of way, as I just don't see myself as someone who's ready to take orders from the client, and much more the person that is here to make sure that we're doing the right things in the right order and that we're not going to make stupid mistakes that you've made in the past, because I'm here now and my job is to help you to be successful and get the results you're looking for. And it might be the case that the client can prove to you that the thing that they're bringing to you is important and is urgent, and then you can go into the discussion that we just talked about, right? Which is like, when are we going to do this? If we say yes to this, what do we have to say no to, etc., etc. And so it's just trying to figure out what your role is with the client, as an expert, as an outside, um, liberating force for the client.
I found just saying to people, how do you see my role here, is
Hmm.
like, it's such a simple question. Because I
Well,
walk in thinking I'm supposed to design
sure.
their whole intergalactic infrastructure, and they go, "Oh, can you just do Twitter for me?" And it's like it's calming. What did you want to say there?
Well, yeah. So I think that again, we're back to this idea of thinking upstream, the Vanguard Principle, getting ahead of problems before they become problems. So one of my standard questions that I teach everybody is to make sure you have a, well, there's two things now that have shown up, which is, number one is you're asking a question so you can start a conversation about what your relationship is going to look like as you work together. So for me, it'd be something like, have you ever hired a business coach before? What did you like? What didn't you like? What should our relationship look like? And I'm really trying to make sure that from the very beginning, we're all aligned on exactly what my role is and what your role as the client is, right? So that's a really good conversation to have at the beginning. The reason for that is, like, if you're getting ahead of problems before they become problems and you're bringing up these conversations early, then you can, like, that's just easier. It's easier to deal with it then than it is to deal with it when you've got the problem, right? So for example, a couple of months down the line, the client will be like, and this happens, the client said, I don't really know what I'm supposed to be doing. There's no dead, like, they're putting, basically they're blaming you for the fact that they're not getting their work done, when in fact it's really them that's at fault, because they haven't actually put in their calendar when they're going to be doing this work, right? And so by knowing that, you can get ahead of that. So at the beginning of the relationship, we want to talk about accountability. We want to talk about our relationship. Similarly, I would say there's a conversation to be had there, Bernie, about, what do you see us working on together? But ultimately, you don't want them just to say anything. You want to help them reframe the idea of what success looks like when they're working with you. So, for example, you might say, well, what's the biggest challenge you have with growing your business right now? Or what would you say is the biggest challenge you have with getting leads into your business at the moment? Or some type of question that gets them talking about the challenges. So, to your point, Bernie, I don't know that you would want to work with someone that says, I just need help with my Twitter, because you would probably say, well, what do you mean by that? And they'd be like, well, we're not got enough followers. And I say, well, if you had enough followers, what would that look like? And then they would say, well, it needs to be this number. You say, well, why that number? Where are you today? Where do you want to be? Why does that matter so much? And if you had that number of followers, what would that look like? How would that impact your? Do you know what I mean? So the way that we reframe success with our clients is to use the I3 model, which is issue, impact, importance. So if a client comes to you, and just take this as a simple example, Bernie, which is if the client comes to you and says, I want you just to do our Twitter, you go, well, why is that so important, right? Issue. What's the problem here? What's the challenge? You're really digging into what's the problem they're trying to solve for here. And then the impact is, how is this negatively impacting? What would it look like to be successful here, right? You want to really understand, it's called stretching the gap between where they are and where they want to be. And then, of course, you want to understand how important it is to them. And this is a big challenge in client-facing work, is like the client comes to you and says, hey, we want to do our Twitter better. And you go, cool, let's get stuck in. And like 2 months down the line, they go, this isn't really important anymore. We're going to go over here and do this other thing with this other person. So we're going to stop paying you because it doesn't feel important. However, if you had had a really good discussion with the client at the beginning and you really established issue, impact, and you were able to raise the stakes and stretch the gap between where they are and where they want to be, and by the end of that conversation, they were like, this is probably the most important thing that we could do in our business right now. And you had a timeline for it. You say, look, in order to do this really well, it's going to take 6 months. Here's the program. Here's exactly what we're going to do. And the client says, we're all in. Or they say, actually, now after speaking to you, Bernie, I can see that this isn't really the problem that we have. The problem we have is over here. So in other words, you're scoping it out from the very beginning, and the client feels like the problem they're trying to solve is worth their time and effort and energy. And you go from someone that was an order taker, right? I want you to do our Twitter, to someone who has helped them to think more strategically about the problem they're trying to solve and why it actually matters, so that just in a short period of time, it could be 8 weeks, 12 weeks down the line, they don't end up just saying, oh, like this isn't important anymore, or they get distracted with something else, or they stop doing the work that you wanted to do, they stop turning up for your meetings, they start to, the authority that you have is diminished over time. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
It does. It does. Nearly all the time you're speaking there, I was having heart palpitations about time and the like how much time you would waste if you didn't ask the question up front. And one, I
Right.
used to work
Time,
with this.
energy. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Well, someone I used to work with, I learned this off them. Was I was in a meeting when this was like 10 years ago, and she said, "Can I ask you about this?" And I couldn't believe, and it was about money and invoices and everything like that. And I was like, "Oh my god, she's asked that!" And she just said really calmly, "It's like, Chris, I'd rather be awkward now for 10 seconds than awkward for the next 6 months. So like, where as it stands." And the client went, "Oh, we can do it like this," and it was fine. And it was like a
Right.
4-minute thing that would have to be talked about at some point anyway, and then it just established the
Sure.
parameters.
Yeah, I mean, this is
Um,
it. With difficult things, the difficult, awkward conversations that you need to have, you could almost always assume that the easiest time to have that conversation is right now. The longer you leave it, the harder it gets.
mhm. What what else can you say about time? Because I'm sort of, I want to ask a time
Right.
question, but I haven't got a clear one in my head.
Time in terms of like, so yeah, this is like the way I think about it, Bernie, is hard, easy, right? So like you're doing the hard thing now, so it's easier later, essentially, right? And that's both in terms of time, but I would also say like friction's a major source of frustration for both the client-facing professional and the client. And so I would just like loop this under customer experience. So for example, if like every other month or so your client is sort of like on the fence about whether they want to continue working with you, that's like energy that you don't need. They don't need it. They don't need to be worrying about it. It means that they're doubtful. And so anything that you can do to help the client feel confident that they're on the right path, doing the right work, and that you've set them up for success means you're sort of like stripping all that friction out of the relationship from the very beginning. And therefore, you're actually going to have a really frictionless relationship with the client. Do you see? So it's not just time for you as the professional, but it's also energy and friction and frustration for the client. You don't want to fight with your and have resistance. So what you're doing is you're sort of disarming all of that from the very beginning. So I think it's time, it's energy, it's also like arguably it can manifest itself in money as well. So that your clients are not only paying you on time, but when they pay you, they feel like this is the best. This is like paying this money to you is one of the best things that they could be doing right now. You know, it's all confidence. It's all confidence and commitment and conviction from the client to the work that we're doing together. And the more of that you have, the less friction you have, and therefore the more likely you're going to get results faster with the work that you're doing as well. So it's all time, but it's like it's exponential, right? You don't do this work, you don't have these conversations in advance, then you're going to feel like a lot of friction and resistance in the relationship in the process. You do all of this, and you can move faster, you can do better work, you're really thriving as a client facing professional with the clients that you're working with, and your clients are loving the work that you're doing together, and it feels like a really great like setup and a really great relationship. So that's the way I think about it.
I've got one last question, which again is very badly formed. Is this? I just know from personal experience there's this kind of relationship between recognizing your value to whatever situation you're in, like we're talking about with a client, or and then there's your own sense of self-worth, and then the way people pleasing plays out in that thing. Can you
Yeah.
give us a little nugget to end on there?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things here that I'll keep succinct if I can, Bernie. As the one thing I figured out a while back is that our need to be liked is holding us back from not only doing our best work, but holding our clients back from their success at their highest potential as well, right? So our need to be liked is holding everybody back, right? So the more people pleasing there is going on in the relationship, the less likely you are to get to where you want to go. Okay. And so when you think about this, and it's really what you just said there, is that the one thing to consider here is that the level of respect that you want to receive from your clients will never be higher than the respect that you have for yourself. Okay. The level of respect you receive from your clients can never be higher than the respect you have for yourself. And so, if we want to overcome our need to be liked and we want to overcome our people pleasing tendencies, it really is an inward job. Like the work is on you. You mentioned that self respect, self assuredness, thinking about the values, really being clear about who you want to work with, what type of work you want to do, what you want your working lifestyle to look like. And we're coming back to sort of like full circle to boundaries here, is like setting yourself up to do your best work, right? And if you can do that and protect yourself so that you can do your best work, then the clients that you do choose to work with are going to get the best version of you, and you're going to be able to do the best work for the client, and they're going to get their best results. However, if you've got a high need to be liked and you've got a lot of people pleasing tendencies and behaviors and habits around all of that, then you're absolutely not going to be able to do your best work with your client, because you're simply not going to be able to say what needs to be said in the moments where your clients are making bad choices, making big mistakes, or pushing you back on your expertise. So the more you need to be liked, the more likely the client is going to start taking over, like, and you're going to become that order taker. And this, one of the ways that this manifests itself, last point here, Bernie, one of the ways that this manifests itself is that is the is not having and not inviting difficult conversations with your clients. And one of the things I've recognized is that the strength of your relationships with your clients correlates with the number of difficult conversations that you're willing to have. And this isn't about just sitting there waiting for a difficult conversation to take place. This is like a proactive nature. It's like I can see the client is this behavior is getting in the way of their success, or they're making a decision here which I'm almost certain is going to lead to these problems. I absolutely have to say something in advance, because if they get there and they make the mistake, they're going to just come back to me and say, why didn't you tell me earlier anyway, right? And so what we want to do is get ahead of that. We're back to thinking upstream, but knowing this, and I think this is interesting to me, because a lot of people say, I don't want to have difficult conversations because I don't want to risk the relationship. But it's actually inverse. The fact that you're not having difficult conversations is the reason why your relationship's at risk. And so if you think about the closest people in your life, the people you love the most, the people you respect the most, just look at all the shit you've been through together, right? And it's like, yeah, that's it. The stronger relationships are built on difficult conversations. Our job as client-facing professionals is to be very proactive and be inviting those difficult conversations into the relationship, knowing that the more we have of those, the stronger our relationship will be, the better results we'll get, the better work we'll do together.
Beautiful. There's that is so true about there's a lot of people I've worked with on and off for ages, and it's when we have like really difficult times and make it through. Like in particular, Janine and I have been doing stuff together for ages and have had lots of hairy situations, and it's in those moments that like Janine was, I mean, this isn't a work related thing, but the week my dad died in 2019, Janine was staying with us in London, and that like bonded us for life. So
Right.
it's
That's exactly right. I think to keep in mind that your clients, when a client hires you, right, regardless of what type of work you're doing, right, they already have a whole bunch of yes people in their life. They don't need another yes person. Somebody that's going to nod along and say they're right all the time, right? They need somebody that's going to push back on them and help them think differently about what they want in their life, right? So, I think we just need to remember what our role is, what our job is, and turn up as the expert, turn up as the professional that our clients actually need us to be, right? There's lots to this, but this is really at the crux of it. It's just getting really clear on why they're hiring you and who you need to be in that relationship for them to be successful, to get the results they're looking for.
Ace. One last note I need to end on, folks, is because we drift. I love talking about this stuff, so we drifted a little bit into client relationship stuff there, which I think is really valuable. And if you are running a co-working space, I think you probably would have worked out how that would apply for. I'm a community manager. I'm running a co-working space, and we said a few times in this podcast, order taker. And there's this, we talk a lot about hospitality and co-working, and one of the distinctions is if you are taking orders from everyone who's in your community, you are like a rushed waiter or waitress. And then if you position yourself, as the guide or the leader or the community manager, and hold that. How do you say it, Chris? Like hold that space? What's a way to?
Well, I don't know. The way I think about it is just like coming back to setting the conditions, right? It's
That's
like
it.
you're sort of in control. It's like somebody's coming into your space, right? And this is how it works around here, and like and we've set it up so that you can have a great time here. And this is how you're setting the rules, you're setting the conditions, you're setting the environment for, whatever you want, determine whatever success is. I think that's what you're really getting at there.
That's exactly what I wanted to say, and I just ran out of the words to say it. So, it's lunchtime here in Vigo in Spain, and I'm like angry. Where it was going so well to that point, wasn't it?
Hangry is what you are.
Hungry, can't even say it. So, Chris Marr, where can we find you online? What do you want us to link to? What's useful? Do you have a book? All that kind of stuff.
Well, I do have a book. It's called Become an Authoritative Coach. You can get that on Amazon for close to $10 or something like that these days. But I think what would be mostly relevant to what we've been talking about today is my People Pleasers Path to Authority assessment. It's a 20-question assessment across 5 categories, some of which we've been talking today. and it'll give you like the higher the score, the more of a people pleaser you are. So you take the assessment, and at the end you'll get a score across 5 categories. But not only that, you'll actually unlock an exclusive 5-day training program with 5 videos to help you improve your scores in each of those 5 categories as well. So if you're listening to this and you like what you're hearing and you think there's some value in this for you to kind of discover perhaps where your gaps or challenges might be and you want to work on those, then I would go ahead and take that assessment, unlock the training, and get stuck into that work. And you can find it probably, I'd imagine it'll go into the show notes here, Bernie, right? But you could also
link in the show notes.
Yeah, you can also go to Instagram at the Authoritative Coach, and you can literally DM me the word score, and I will automatically send you a link to the assessment. So that's DM at the Authoritative Coach. You can follow me there, and you can send me a message, just the word score, and I will send you the assessment.
That's so groovy, that little app, isn't it? Like, you can
nice
boost your Instagram and get the information at the same time.
Yeah, and Instagram is my main platform, so if you want more of this in like short form content, then at the Authoritative Coach on Instagram is the best place to connect with me and get my most recent ideas, and a bunch of stuff that we've been talking about today sits there as well.
Ace, thanks very much, Mr. Marr. Always appreciate your time and attention. And ladies and gentlemen, if you are here, zoom over to Substack. The best place to connect with us is Substack, because you get an update and a link to listen on your favorite podcast platform, but also we'll email you details and email you other stuff there. And that's where the Co-working Values podcast exists. And as always, there's links in the show notes to the community builder Cohort, which is the four-person group, small group coaching program that Emily and I run for community builders and people who run co-working spaces. You can register for the European Co-working Day, which is in May, which is about running small events in your co-working space and doing that bit that's like really educating the general public about what a co-working space is. And then, of course, there's the LinkedIn group, which is 8,000 people, of which only about 1,000 people really pay attention, but it's a great place to ask questions, anything to do with running a co-working space, building a community, what type of software do you want to use, and what's the best thing to have for lunch on a Tuesday when you have 6 people in your co-working space and it's raining outside. Anyway, wherever you are in the world, be careful out there. It is a jungle.